Ma'am, I'm gonna have to ask you to step aside. This is a private function. The security guard at the Pinnacle Tower Hotel put a hand on my arm, physically steering me away from the grand ballroom entrance. Through it, my husband Julian had just vanished, sharing a laugh with his assistant Chloe. I just stood there, frozen in my sapphire blue dress, watching through the huge glass doors as every other partner found their seat at the lavishly decorated tables. I, on the other hand, was left in the corridor, dismissed like a catering staffer who had lost her way. The shame was a hot flush on my cheeks, but the real pain, the one that took my breath away, was the fact that I had seen this exact moment coming for weeks, or maybe, if I was being honest, for months. All the warning signs had been there, echoing in the silence of our cramped Chicago apartment, in the subtle ways Julian had begun to dismiss my work for him, treating my genius as something he was merely entitled to. Just this morning, I had been up at 4 a.m., long before our daughter Sophie stirred. With Julian's laptop open in front of me, I was reviewing his quarterly presentation for Apex Solutions. His budget forecasts were a disaster. A single formula error had thrown them off by $5 million. A mistake that would have made him look like a fool in front of the entire board. I fixed it. I always did. I rebuilt the corrupted formulas, generated the correct charts, and polished the data visualizations that would make him look like a visionary. If you believe that brilliant women deserve the credit for their own work, not to be erased by the men who take it, please think about subscribing. It's completely free, and it helps us bring more stories like this to light. Now let's get back to how I took back my power. It was only 3 years ago that I was the one on stage, presenting my proprietary supply chain algorithms to standing room-only crowds at tech conferences. Julian would be in the front row, scribbling notes, and he'd ask me later to walk him through the complex parts he couldn't quite wrap his head around. Now, those very same algorithms, the ones I had refined and perfected over countless sleepless nights at our small kitchen table, were being passed off as his groundbreaking innovations. The irony was suffocating as I stood in that hallway. The very systems that were giving Apex Solutions its competitive edge were designed by a woman who wasn't even deemed worthy of a seat at their celebration dinner. The first real crack in my composure had appeared last week at Sophie's 8th birthday party. She had been talking nonstop for months about a junior robotics kit she'd seen online, showing me videos of it, excitedly explaining how she would build a robot that could help Mommy with her coding. When Julian finally showed up 2 hours late, he was holding a generic birthday card from a Walgreens and a cheap chocolate bar. The light in Sophie's eyes just went out. "Daddy forgot," she whispered, and the sound broke something deep inside me. Julian just gave a little shrug, mumbling something about being swamped with important work. And I knew, with a certainty that made me sick, that the important work was my work. It was the inventory management algorithm I had developed that was saving Apex millions. It was the predictive modeling system I built from scratch. It was the automated reporting dashboard that Julian couldn't even operate without the step-by-step notes I wrote for him. While he was supposedly too busy to remember his own daughter's birthday, I had seen the Uber receipts on our joint account, trips to fancy downtown restaurants always for two, always to places he told me we couldn't afford. The Tiffany's receipt was the final, brutal confirmation. I found it 3 weeks ago doing his laundry, crumpled in the pocket of his gym shorts as if it were meaningless trash $10,000 for a bracelet. That was the same week he told me we couldn't possibly afford Sophie's summer coding camp, the one she'd been dreaming of, the one that could have been the start of a real future for her, a future I could have given her myself, if I wasn't so bone-tired from doing Julian's job on top of my own freelance consulting gigs just to make our rent. My mother had tried to warn me. She'd called me late one Tuesday night last month, her voice low and careful. "Ellie, darling, I saw Julian today over in River North at that new French place you said you wanted to try." My heart had hammered against my ribs because Julian was supposed to be in Denver for a critical client meeting. He was with a woman, my mother continued, her voice gentle. That young blonde from his office. The one from the holiday party, Chloe Saunders. 26 years old with a fresh Wharton MBA hired 6 months ago as Julian's executive assistant. I'd met her only once, at that very holiday party, where she'd looked straight through me as if I were part of the wallpaper while telling everyone within earshot how brilliant Julian was. And now, through the ballroom glass, I watched her lean into him, her hand resting possessively on his arm, and on her wrist, catching the light of the chandeliers, was the $10,000 Tiffany's bracelet. I pulled out my phone and started scrolling through our credit card history. It was all there, a trail of transactions I had either missed or chosen to ignore in my misplaced trust, the Ritz-Carlton. Downtown on nights he claimed to be working late, dinners for two, at restaurants he'd passed off as client meetings. Another charge from a jewelry store just yesterday, one he hadn't even tried to hide. The whole ugly pattern was laid out in our transaction history, a digital map of his betrayal. "Excuse me, ma'am, you're going to have to move," the security guard said again, his voice harder this time. Just then, Julian turned, and our eyes locked through the glass. For a split second, his expression changed. I saw a flash of surprise, maybe even guilt, but it was gone as quickly as it came. He leaned towards Chloe and whispered something that made her look over at me and laugh. I couldn't hear the words, but I didn't need to. I read his lips perfectly. "This isn't your world, Ellie. 7 years. 7 years of waking up before the sun to clean up his messes. 7 years of putting my own career on ice so he could build his. 7 years of being told we had to invest in his future because it was our shared future." I had actually believed him when he said that once he made senior vice president, I could finally restart my career. Maybe even launch that consulting firm I'd always dreamed of. I had trusted him when he swore my support was just a temporary sacrifice, that we were a team, building something together. But standing there in that cold corridor, watching him toast his success with champagne I would never taste, surrounded by colleagues who had no idea I even existed, the truth finally hit me with the force of a physical blow. I wasn't his partner. I was his secret weapon, his uncredited ghostwriter, the brain he borrowed while he collected all the glory. And now, apparently, he'd found a younger, blonder upgrade to display on his arm. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Sophie's babysitter. "She's asking when you'll be home to work on your coding project." Another promise I'd have to break. I had spent the entire afternoon prepping Julian's presentation for Monday's meeting, while he was supposedly at the office. But his phone's location data, which I had checked earlier, told me he was actually at Chloe's apartment. I took one last look through those glass doors at the world I had built but would never be a part of. Then I turned and walked toward the exit, the sound of my heels echoing in the empty hall. The next morning was shattered by a doorbell that had no business ringing at 7 a.m. I opened it to find Chloe Saunders standing in our hallway. She was wearing a cream-colored designer suit that looked pristine against the backdrop of our building's peeling paint. She clutched a leather portfolio, and on her wrist was that same Tiffany's bracelet. Her perfume, something expensive and cloying, immediately filled our small entryway. "I need Julian's signature on the quarterly reports," she said, pushing past me into the apartment without an invitation. Her gaze swept across our living room with a look of barely veiled disgust, taking in the worn-out second-hand couch, Sophie's toys strewn across the rug, the stack of my old programming textbooks I was using to prop up my monitor. He forgot to sign them yesterday while we were going over the presentation. I just stood there in my old coffee-stained Northwestern sweatshirt, watching her perfectly manicured nails tap impatiently against the portfolio. She moved through my home as if she owned it, her heels clicking on our scuffed hardwood floors. "Julian's in the shower," I said, my voice surprisingly even, despite the hot rage churning in my stomach. She turned to me then, really looked at me for the first time, and a slow, cruel smirk spread across her lips. You know, Julian deserves so much better than this, she said, with a vague gesture toward our modest apartment. But her eyes were fixed on me, and we both knew she wasn't talking about the furniture. Better than what? I asked, though the answer was already screaming in my head. Someone who gets his world, she said, his ambition. She placed the folder on our coffee table, right on top of a page of algorithm sketches I'd been working on for Julian's next big project, someone who can stand beside him at company events, not get stuck in the hallway. The jab about last night's gala was a deliberate, calculated strike. She knew I'd been turned away. Of course, she knew. She had probably been the one to have my name removed from the guest list. After she left with Julian's signatures, which he gave her while I was in the kitchen, pretending not to see his hand linger on hers for a moment too long, Sophie padded out of her bedroom, already dressed for school. "Mommy, why doesn't Daddy ever come to my school things?" she asked me over breakfast, listlessly pushing her Cheerios around her bowl. Lily's dad came to the science fair, and Marcus's dad helps out with story time. I didn't have an answer for her that wouldn't shatter her 8-year-old heart. Julian had missed her last 3 school events, including the parent-teacher conference where her teacher had specifically asked for both of us to attend to discuss putting Sophie in an advanced math program. "Daddy's just very busy with work, sweetie," I managed to say, the lie tasting like ash in my mouth. Later that morning, at school drop-off, Mrs. Davison pulled me aside. Her expression worried Mrs. Vance. "I just need to update our emergency contact information. Your husband called yesterday and said, if we can't reach you, we should call a Ms. Chloe Saunders. He said she's his executive assistant and can handle any emergencies." The ground seemed to tilt under my feet. He did what? He also said she might be picking Sophie up from time to time. I just wanted to confirm that with you, of course. I felt a wave of nausea. Chloe Saunders. The woman who had stood in my living room just hours before, telling me I wasn't good enough, was now on my daughter's emergency contact list. The sheer audacity of it. The cold, calculated planning that must have gone into it. It all came together in a moment of terrifying clarity. That evening, while Julian was in the shower after another late meeting, his phone buzzed on the nightstand. I knew his passcode, Sophie's birthday, the irony of which was not lost on me, and what I found on it obliterated any last shred of denial. Text after text between him and Chloe, planning their future, planning it for after his situation was handled. That's what I was now. Not a wife, not a partner, a situation to be handled. "Can't wait until we don't have to hide anymore." Chloe had texted soon. Julian had replied, "After the promotion is a sure thing. Ellie won't put up a fight if I frame it the right way. She never fights back." Just then, my own phone rang, startling me. It was Julian calling from his office phone. "Ellie, thank God. The system's crashing. The entire inventory algorithm is throwing up errors, and I have the board presentation first thing tomorrow. You have to fix this, please." The raw panic in his voice would have spurred me into action once. Now it just sounded like an opportunity. I went to the corner of our bedroom that served as my office and logged into the Apex servers remotely. The bug was laughably simple, a corrupted data entry that was causing a cascade failure. As I worked, repairing the code line by line, a new plan began to form. Deep within the architecture of the system, in places Julian would never even know existed, I started embedding my digital signature. It wasn't just my initials. It was a complex cryptographic proof of authorship, a digital fingerprint that only another high-level programmer would ever be able to find or understand. Every single function, every algorithm, every innovation I had ever created for him now carried my indelible, hidden mark. If I ever needed to prove who the real architect was, this trail of digital breadcrumbs would lead directly back to me. "It's fixed," I told Julian when I called him back an hour later. "You're a lifesaver," he said, his voice flooded with relief. "I don't know what I'd do without you." Apparently, you're in the process of figuring that out, I said quietly, but he had already hung up. An hour later, my friend Claire showed up with a bottle of wine and an expression of grim sympathy. We'd been friends since college, and her husband, Mark, worked in the Apex accounting department. "Ellie, I have to tell you something," she said. Not even waiting for me to close the door, Mark overheard some of the execs talking yesterday. "Julian's getting the senior VP promotion next month." "That's good," I said. The word feeling foreign and wrong, there's more. Claire poured 2 large glasses of wine, her hands shaking slightly. "Chloe is getting a promotion too. She's going to be a director, reporting directly to Julian, with a salary that's completely unheard of for someone with her level of experience. Ellie, they're not even trying to hide it. Everybody knows everybody, it seemed, except the wife who had single-handedly built the very systems that made Julian valuable enough for a promotion in the first place. Everybody except the woman who had sacrificed her own career, who had spent 1,000 nights debugging his code while he slept, who had created innovations that had saved Apex millions of dollars and never received so much as a mention in the company-wide email. I stared into my wine glass, the deep red of the liquid matching the cold anger that had been simmering inside me for months. Claire squeezed my hand, and in that moment my decision solidified. I would not be a situation to be handled. I would not be the invisible woman behind Julian's success a moment longer. 2 weeks after Claire's visit, the invitation arrived. Thick, cream-colored cardstock with gold embossing. The Apex Solutions logo gleamed at the top. I ran my finger over the raised text. "Mr. Julian Vance is cordially invited to the annual Apex Innovators Gala." Just his name. Not Mr. and Mrs. Vance. Not Julian Vance and guest. Just him. I placed it on the kitchen counter for him to find. Then I picked up the phone and dialed his office. Maria, his department's admin, answered, her normally cheerful voice turning instantly tight when she recognized mine. "Hi, Maria. I'm calling about the Gala invitation. It seems there was a mistake. It only has Julian's name on it." The silence on the other end of the line was so long, I thought she might have hung up. And then I heard it in the background. Chloe's high-pitched laugh, followed by her saying something about avoiding any awkwardness. "Mrs. Vance," Maria finally said, her voice thick with discomfort, "I'm so sorry. Mr. Vance specifically requested a solo invitation. He said it would be better for networking." "Networking," I repeated, my voice flat. "I'm really, really sorry," Maria whispered, and I could hear the genuine regret in her voice. I tried to tell him, "It's not your fault, Maria," I said, and hung up. That evening, Julian barely looked at the invitation before tucking it into his briefcase. "Big night coming up," he said, avoiding my eyes. "The whole board will be there. Crucial for the promotion." "I know," I said. "I'm thinking of going." His head snapped up. "Ellie, that's not a good idea. It's a work thing. Every other spouse will be there, Julian." I checked with Claire. Mark got a +1. "Your situation is different," he said, already turning away. The conversation, in his mind, finished. But it wasn't finished in mine. That night, with Julian snoring softly beside me, I went to my closet and took out the sapphire blue dress my mother had worn to her own company award ceremonies decades ago. She had also been a software engineer back in a time when a woman in a tech boardroom was an anomaly. The dress fit me like it was made for me, its deep blue silk shimmering in the dim light. The night of the gala, Julian left at 6, saying he had to get there early to prepare. I waited until 7, then I called a car. My hands were perfectly steady as I applied a dark red lipstick in the back seat, the city lights of Chicago blurring past the window. "Special night?" the driver asked, glancing at me in the rearview mirror. "You could say that," I replied. The Pinnacle Tower loomed ahead, a monument of glass and steel. Valets scurried to open doors for glamorous couples, and through the towering windows, I could see the ballroom, a fantasy of crystal chandeliers and cascading flowers. I walked through the main doors, my heels clicking on the marble floor, and followed the signs for the gala. The same security guard was stationed at the ballroom entrance, checking names on a tablet. When I walked up to him, His face was a mask of professional indifference. Name: Eleanor Vance. I'm Julian Vance's wife. He scrolled through his list, his brow furrowed. Scrolled again. I'm not seeing you on the list, ma'am. There must be a mistake. I'm his wife. I'm sorry, but if you're not on the list, you have to wait out here. Those are my instructions. His hand came to my arm, firmly but politely guiding me back from the entrance. And through the glass doors, I could see it all. The round tables with their white linens, the executives laughing with their husbands and wives seated beside them. The CEO's husband was at the head table. The CFO's wife was raising a glass in a toast. And there, at a prime table right near the stage, was Julian, with Chloe seated next to him in a glittering silver dress. Our eyes met through the glass. I saw him register my presence, saw the flicker of panic that was instantly replaced by a hard, defiant glare. He leaned over and whispered something to Chloe. She turned to look at me, and I read Julian's lips as he spoke the words again, this time with a dismissive smirk. "This isn't your world, Ellie." Chloe's hand went to his arm, a gesture both possessive and triumphant. She said something that made him laugh, and they both turned away from me, dismissing my presence as easily as the guard had. My phone was in my hand before I'd even consciously decided to take it out. I started taking pictures. Julian and Chloe, laughing together, her hand on his thigh, just visible beneath the tablecloth. The way he leaned into her, his face inches from hers. I took photos of the other tables, filled with happy couples, proof that spouses were, in fact, welcome. My fingers flew across the screen, taking a screenshot of the Apex website, where the gala was described as a celebration for employees and their families. Mrs. Vance. Maria, the admin, had materialized at my side, having rushed out of the ballroom. Her face was flushed, her eyes wide with what looked like real distress. "I'm so sorry about this. I tried to add you to the list, but Mr. Vance explicitly..." What, Maria? She glanced around nervously, then leaned in. "He signed legal documents last month. Official affidavit stating that all the algorithmic innovations developed in his department were his sole intellectual property. The board has no idea you were involved, because on paper, legally, your contributions don't exist." My blood ran cold. He signed away my work? I wasn't supposed to see them, but I processed all of his paperwork. Her voice dropped even lower. "He threatened my job when he found out I'd read them. He said if I ever mentioned your name in connection with any project, he'd make sure I was blacklisted in this city, Maria. There's more," she was practically whispering. "The Caldwell project 3 years ago, the one that saved the company during the merger? I know that was your work. Mr. Sterling specifically asked Julian how he developed such an elegant solution, and Julian told him he'd been working on it alone for months. Arthur Sterling, the chairman of the board." I looked through the glass again and found him at the head table, his distinguished silver hair making him easy to spot. As if he could feel my stare, he glanced toward the doors. Our eyes met for a brief moment, and his expression changed to one of faint confusion. He tilted his head, a flicker of recognition in his eyes. 3 years ago, I had done some anonymous consulting work for Arthur through a third-party firm, fixing a critical flaw in the algorithm that managed his personal investment portfolio. He never knew my name. The contract was under my maiden name, and all our communication had been through encrypted channels. But he had praised the work as genius-level problem-solving. Now here he was, looking at Julian Vance's wife, standing outside his company's biggest event of the year, and I could see the gears starting to turn in his mind. Maria gently squeezed my arm. "Mrs. Vance, you deserve so much better." As she slipped back into the ballroom, I stood there in the corridor, my phone feeling heavy in my hand, now filled with a gallery of my own public humiliation. But the humiliation was morphing into something else, something cold, precise, and powerful. 7 years of suppressed anger were crystallizing into a single point of absolute clarity. I opened my email client, addressed a new message to Arthur Sterling, and attached a single file. The algorithm I had written for his portfolio 3 years ago, with my hidden cryptographic signature embedded deep in the code. I sent the email with a hand that no longer trembled, then turned and walked away from the Pinnacle Tower Hotel, my head held high. The next morning, I woke up with a singular purpose. If I was going to reclaim my life, I needed a case that was irrefutable, not just screenshots and hurt feelings, but a mountain of evidence so solid that Julian's carefully constructed world of lies would be reduced to dust. The first thing I did was go to an electronics store. The clerk, a kid who looked like he was still in college, helped me pick out audio recording software that was legal to use with single-party consent in Illinois. I could legally record any conversation I was a part of. I paid in cash, went home, and installed it on my laptop, syncing it to capture any conversation that happened in Julian's home office. For the next 3 months, I lived a double life. By day, I was the supportive wife Julian took for granted. I ironed his shirts, making sure the creases were perfect. I cooked his favorite meals. I smiled when he gave me a distracted kiss on the cheek, and I pretended not to notice when he guarded his phone like it held state secrets. But by night, I was someone else entirely. After Julian was asleep, I would sneak into his office and photograph every document he brought home. Contracts, presentations, financial reports, all of them built on the foundations of my work. I would then upload everything to a heavily encrypted cloud server I had created, naming the folder Project Nightingale. Every file was time-stamped, cataloged, and cross-referenced with the original code I had written years ago. The recordings were the most damning 2 weeks in. I captured a call between Julian and Chloe. His voice was perfectly clear through the office door I had left strategically ajar. "Ellie's algorithm is what put me on the map," he was saying, followed by a short laugh. "She has no idea I've been putting my name on all her work. She's too trusting, that's her problem. Brilliant mind, zero business sense. When are you going to tell her about us?" Chloe's voice whined through the speaker. "After the promotion is locked in. I'll tell her it's mutual. She won't fight me. She never fights back." I stood in the dark hallway, my hand clamped over my mouth to stifle any sound, as the recording app on my phone captured every single word it was during the second month that Momentum Technologies found me. I'd stumbled across an anonymous challenge on a high-level coding forum. Solve this logistics optimization problem. Significant opportunity for the right mind. The problem was beautiful in its complexity, a multivariable supply chain issue that would take most programmers days to even begin to unravel. But I recognized the underlying structure immediately. It was similar to a problem I had solved for Julian 2 years ago. I couldn't resist. My fingers flew across the keyboard, the familiar thrill of solving the unsolvable rushing through me. 2 hours later, I submitted my solution under a pseudonym. The next day, my personal cell phone rang, an unknown number. "Ms. Bishop?" The voice was crisp and confident. "This is Isabel Rossi, the CEO of Momentum Technologies. We're the ones who posted that challenge. Your solution wasn't just correct, it was extraordinary." My heart hammered in my chest. I had used my maiden name on the forum, but I had no idea how she'd found my number. "We've been aware of your work for a while," Isabel continued. "The anonymous improvements you submitted to our public API 6 months ago. We knew that was you. We'd like to offer you a position, Chief Innovation Officer, full credit and recognition for all your work, and a starting salary of $500,000. I sank down onto the edge of our bed, the phone pressed hard against my ear. "You know about my situation? We know talent when we see it," she said simply, "regardless of whose name is currently on the paperwork. The offer stands. Let us know when you're ready." The 3rd month brought an unexpected wave of grief. I was organizing my evidence files when an email landed in my inbox. The subject line made my chest tighten. "Remembering Dr. Evelyn Reed." My favorite professor from Northwestern, my mentor, the woman who had seen my potential when I was just a shy freshman, had passed away. The obituary detailed her groundbreaking work in machine learning and her unwavering dedication to championing women in STEM. Sophie found me crying at the kitchen table, the obituary glowing on my laptop screen. "Mommy, why are you crying?" I pulled her into my lap, burying my face in her hair. "Someone very important to me is gone, sweetheart. She believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. I believe in you, Mommy," Sophie said, her voice solemn. "You're the smartest person I know." That night, I renamed my evidence folder. It was no longer Project Nightingale. It was Project Evelyn, in honor of the woman who taught me that hiding your own brilliance is the greatest tragedy of all. My friend Olivia, who I'd gone to law school with before I switched to computer science and who now practiced family law, met me for coffee in discreet little cafes. She reviewed my evidence with meticulous care. "This recording is gold," she said during our last meeting, listening to Julian's confession through a pair of earbuds. "The evidence of financial fraud is solid, and your digital signatures on the code are unassailable. Ellie, you have enough here to absolutely bury him, professionally and personally. What about Sophie? With evidence of financial crimes and hiding assets, you'll get primary custody, no question." Olivia squeezed my hand. "So, when are you going to do it?" I thought about the Gala invitation, still sitting on our kitchen counter addressed only to Julian. "Soon," I said. "There's just one more performance I need to give." That night, I watched Julian pack his briefcase for the next day, humming off-key as he sorted through papers he didn't understand. He had no idea that every single page had been photographed, every conversation recorded, every lie documented. He kissed my forehead distractedly, his mind already on his meetings, on Chloe, on his promotion. "Big week," he said. "Bigger than you can possibly imagine," I replied. But he was already walking away. I was awake at 5 a.m. on the morning of the gala, my stomach in a tight knot of nervous energy. Julian slept soundly beside me, oblivious to the fact that I'd just spent 2 hours perfecting the email that was about to dismantle the life he'd stolen from me. Each attachment was meticulously labeled Project Caldwell 2019.pdf, Q3 Financials 2021.xlsx, Apex Inventory Algorithm v3.txt. 7 years of my work, 7 years of his theft, all organized chronologically, with my digital signatures highlighted in the code like neon signs. The most damning piece of evidence was right at the top of the email, a simple spreadsheet that compared Julian's career trajectory with my innovations. Every promotion, every bonus he'd ever received corresponded exactly to a project I had completed for him. The correlation was absolute. Julian stirred at 6:30, reaching for his phone before he was even fully awake. "Big day," he mumbled, scrolling through his emails without even looking at me. "The biggest," I agreed, watching him. He showered while I made his coffee, just the way he liked it. When he emerged, wrapped in a cloud of expensive cologne Chloe had probably picked out for him, he put on his custom-tailored tuxedo, a suit that had cost more than Sophie's entire year of after-school programs. "You look nice," I said, and I meant it. He looked the part of the successful executive he had pretended to be for so long. "Thanks." He fiddled with his cufflinks, the platinum ones I'd given him for our 5th anniversary, back when I still believed we were a team. "Listen, about tonight." "I know," I said. "You'll be working late." He paused, maybe hearing something new in my tone, but then his phone buzzed. A text from Chloe, I assumed, from the way his face lit up. The moment was gone. "Don't wait up," he said, giving me that same meaningless kiss on the forehead. "I won't," I promised. He left at 3 p.m. I watched from the window as his car turned the corner, then I opened my laptop. The email to Arthur Sterling sat in my drafts folder, scheduled to be sent at exactly 8:45 p.m., right in the middle of when I calculated Julian would be giving his promotion acceptance speech. The subject line was simple: the real architect of Apex's success. Urgent. The message itself was short and to the point. Mr. Sterling, you once praised my anonymous work as genius-level problem-solving. Tonight, I'm solving one last problem. The attached documents provide irrefutable proof that every significant innovation attributed to Julian Vance for the past 7 years was, in fact, created by me, Eleanor Bishop. The algorithms, the predictive models, the cost-saving systems, all of it is mine. I have recordings, cryptographic code signatures, and 7 years of documentation. I felt you should know who really built your company's competitive advantage. Sincerely, Eleanor Bishop, formerly Vance. Claire arrived at 4 p.m. with a makeup bag and a bottle of champagne. "Tonight we make you unforgettable," she announced. She got to work contouring my cheekbones, giving me a smoky eye that made me look fierce. She twisted my hair into an elegant chignon that showed off the line of my neck. My old Northwestern class ring glinted under the light. "The dress," she commanded, and I brought out my mother's sapphire gown. "Julian said this was too much," I murmured as I slipped it on. "Julian is an idiot," Claire said, zipping me up. "You look like exactly what you are, a force of nature." I stared at my reflection. The woman looking back at me wasn't the invisible wife who'd been living in the shadows for 7 years. This was someone else, someone who belonged in a boardroom. Claire drove us to the Pinnacle Tower in her BMW. "You know what you're doing, right?" she asked as we pulled up to the valet. "I'm taking back what's mine." "Good," she said, squeezing my hand. "Mark is inside. He'll make sure the right people are paying attention when the fireworks start. I time my entrance perfectly. At 8:30, I walked toward the ballroom where the same guard stood with his tablet. "Ma'am," he began, recognizing me. "I know," I said, cutting him off. "Guests wait outside." I positioned myself in the exact same spot as before, with a clear view through the glass. Inside, Julian was at the podium, with Chloe beaming at his side. Arthur Sterling was at the head table, his phone face down on the tablecloth. As Julian began his speech, talking about the innovative solutions that had propelled Apex forward, I pulled out my phone. It was 8:44 p.m., 1 minute to go. I couldn't wait. My fingers flew, typing a short new message directly to Arthur Sterling. "Check your email, now." I hit send through the glass. I saw his phone light up. He frowned, picked it up, and his expression went from mild annoyance to pure shock. His eyes widened as he scrolled, opening attachment after attachment. The CFO sitting next to him noticed his reaction and leaned over. Within seconds, both men were staring at their phones. Julian was mid-sentence when Arthur Sterling stood up abruptly. The room fell silent. "Mr. Vance." Sterling's voice was like ice, carrying easily through the glass. "We have a matter to discuss." Immediately, Julian's confident smile evaporated. Behind him, Chloe's hand flew to his arm, but he shook her off, his face turning pale as more and more board members started looking at their own phones. It was a beautiful, terrible domino effect. One screen lighting up, then another, until the entire head table was staring at 7 years of my work, my name digitally stamped all over it. Mark, Claire's husband, stood up from his table. "Is it true?" he asked, his voice ringing out in the silent room. "Has Julian Vance been taking credit for his wife's work this whole time?" The ballroom erupted. Voices rose in a confused, outraged cacophony. Someone shouted, "The algorithms have her signature embedded in the code." Another voice, "This goes back 7 years." And through it all, I stood in the corridor, perfectly visible through the glass doors, wearing my mother's sapphire blue dress that Julian had said was too much. Several people pointed at me, whispering. Arthur Sterling's eyes found mine, and this time his nod wasn't one of confusion. It was a nod of understanding, of recognition, of respect. Julian's gaze finally landed on me, and in that single, shattering moment, he knew his house of cards wasn't just collapsing. It had been systematically demolished, card by card, by the woman he had told to wait outside. The ballroom doors flew open and Julian stumbled out, his polished facade completely gone. His bow tie was crooked, his face was a blotchy red, and I watched as the champagne flute he was holding slipped from his fingers, shattering on the marble floor. "Ellie, what did you do?" His voice was a high, desperate squeak, nothing like the booming executive from an hour ago. His eyes darted from my face to my dress, as if he was truly seeing me for the first time in a decade. I stopped being invisible. I said, my voice so steady, it surprised me. "By the way, I start at Momentum Technologies on Monday, Chief Innovation Officer." They were especially interested in the supply chain algorithm. "You know, the one you've been passing off as yours for the last 3 years?" His mouth opened and closed like a fish. Behind him, guests were now spilling into the corridor, their chatter a low hum of shock and gossip. I heard someone whisper, "That's his wife, the one who wrote everything. You can't do this. This is corporate espionage," Julian stammered, grasping for legal terms he clearly didn't understand. "I'll sue you for what, Julian? For telling the truth?" I held up my phone, showing him the email I had sent. "Every line of code has my digital signature. Every algorithm traces back to my personal laptop. Even the core of your master's thesis, that was my work from grad school, just repackaged." Arthur Sterling emerged from the ballroom then, his silver hair slightly ruffled. He walked directly to me, ignoring Julian completely. "Ms. Bishop," he said, using my maiden name, "that consulting work you did for me 3 years ago, the portfolio optimization, that was you. It wasn't a question." I just nodded, every line. I knew the coding style was familiar when Julian presented the Caldwell project, Sterling mused. The elegance of it, the efficiency. It was identical. He turned to Julian, his expression hardening. "You told me you worked on that solo for months. Mr. Sterling, I can explain." "Save it for the lawyers." Sterling cut him off. "Ms. Bishop, Apex Industries owes you a substantial debt. I would like to formally discuss bringing you on as a senior technical director with full retroactive credit and compensation for all of your innovations." "That's a very generous offer," I said, amazed at my own composure. "But as I said, I've already accepted a position with Momentum Technologies. They offered me something Apex never did, respect from day one." Just then, the corridor filled with new voices, sharp and authoritative. 3 people in dark suits, their FBI badges clearly visible, were walking briskly towards us. "Chloe Saunders?" the lead agent called out. Chloe, who had been trying to disappear into the crowd, froze. "We need to speak with you regarding charges of wire fraud and embezzlement at Apex Solutions. This is ridiculous." Chloe's composure finally cracked. "I didn't do anything. It's a setup." But the agents were already reading her rights as Maria, the admin, hurried over with a laptop, pointing out something on the screen. I saw a flash of bank records. The transfers Julian had made to Chloe's accounts, the same ones I had documented. "She's done this before," Maria was explaining to the agents at her last 2 jobs. "She targets married executives, helps them embezzle funds." "It was legal," Chloe shrieked as they led her away. "Julian said they were consulting fees. It's all his fault." Julian's face went from white to gray. "She's lying. I have no idea what she's talking about." "Really?" I pulled up the recording on my phone, and Julian's own voice filled the corridor. "The transfers to Chloe need to stay off the books. Route them through the marketing budget." Sterling's face was grim. "Mr. Vance, please follow me. The board is convening immediately." They disappeared into a conference room, but not before Sterling turned back to me. "Ms. Bishop, would you be willing to join us? We need to understand the full scope of your work." For the next 3 hours, I sat in a wood-paneled boardroom while the entire board of Apex Solutions went through my life's work. They pulled up algorithm after algorithm on the main screen, my digital signatures glowing in the code. "This optimization model alone has saved this company over $12 million, the CFO said, looking at me with undisguised awe. "You wrote this in your kitchen?" I confirmed, while my daughter was asleep. Julian sat at the far end of the table, looking smaller and smaller with each new revelation. When they played the recording of him admitting to the theft, he just stared at the table. "Mr. Vance," Sterling finally said, "your employment is terminated, effective immediately. You will forfeit all bonuses, stock options, and severance. We will also be pursuing legal action to recover the funds you illegally transferred to Ms. Saunders." "You can't," Julian whispered. "I have a family." "You should have thought of that before you stole from your family," Sterling replied. "When they offered me compensation, retroactive pay for 7 years of uncredited high-level work, the number they quoted took my breath away. It was more than Julian had earned in his entire career. "That's very generous," I said, "but I'll need to have my lawyer review the offer." "Of course." Sterling stood and extended his hand. "Ms. Bishop, I am profoundly sorry that we allowed this to happen. If you ever reconsider our offer—" "I won't," I said simply, "but thank you for finally seeing the truth." As I walked out of the conference room, Julian tried to grab my arm. "Ellie, please. Think about Sophie." I pulled away. "I am thinking about Sophie. I'm thinking about showing her that no one gets to steal your work, your credit, or your dignity, not even her father." Claire was waiting to drive me home. When we pulled up to my apartment building, the lights were on. The babysitter was gone. Julian had come home. I walked up the stairs, my mother's dress rustling around me. When I opened the door, he was sitting on our worn-out couch, still in his tuxedo, his head in his hands. "She's asleep," he said without looking up. I went to Sophie's room and kissed her forehead. Then I came back out. "I'm going to stay at my brother's," he said, his voice hollow. "My lawyer will be in touch about the arrangements. Fine." He finally looked up, his eyes red. "How long?" he whispered. "How long were you planning this? How long were you stealing from me?" I countered. He had no answer. The next morning, Sophie came into the kitchen while I was making pancakes. She looked at Julian's empty chair. "Where's Daddy?" I sat down with her and took her hands. "Daddy isn't going to be living with us anymore, sweetie." "Why?" "Sometimes when people do things that are wrong, they have to face the consequences. Daddy took credit for Mommy's work, and that was dishonest. Like when that boy in my class copied my homework and got in trouble," she asked. "Yes, honey, exactly like that, but with grown-up work." "Are you sad?" she asked, her brown eyes serious. "I'm sad for the man he could have been," I told her honestly. "But I'm not sad about the choices he made. Those are his to live with." She nodded. "Okay. Can we work on my coding project today, since Daddy's not here to interrupt us?" "Of course, baby, right after breakfast." By Monday morning, the story was everywhere. Bloomberg, the Wall Street Journal, CNN. My phone rang off the hook with interview requests. I declined them all with a single statement sent to a small Women in Tech blog. For 7 years, my work was erased. Today, I begin writing my own story at Momentum Technologies. That's all that matters. Apex stock dropped 18%. Screenshots of my code signatures were circulating on programmer forums. Someone leaked the audio of Julian's confession, and it went viral with the hashtag #InvisibleWife. A week later, my phone rang. It was Julian's older brother. "Ellie, please, I'm begging you. He's lost everything. His accounts are frozen. He's living in my basement. Can't you just drop the legal proceedings? For Sophie's sake. For 7 years, I was erased," I said calmly. "He made his choices, but he's family. And Sophie is my daughter. She needs to see that actions have consequences. I won't teach her that forgiveness means accepting erasure." I hung up. On Monday morning, I dressed in a sharp navy suit, my Northwestern ring polished and on my finger. Sophie watched me get ready. "You look like a boss, Mommy." "I am a boss, sweetheart." At Momentum Technologies, Isabel Rossi met me in the lobby. "Your team is waiting," she said, smiling. She opened the door to a conference room, and 20 developers stood up and started applauding. The sound was overwhelming. Ms. Bishop, the lead developer, a young woman named Priya, stepped forward. "We've all studied your work. It's brilliant. We've been waiting for you." "For me?" I asked, my voice thick. "Isabel showed us your solutions months ago when she was trying to recruit you." Priya grinned. "We were all hoping you'd say yes. Nobody writes code like you." Standing there, surrounded by people who saw my work, who knew my name, who valued my mind, I finally understood what it felt like to be seen. 6 months later, I stood backstage at the Chicago Tech Innovation Summit. I was the keynote speaker. My algorithm, now properly credited to Eleanor Bishop, had transformed 3 major industries. As I walked on stage, the applause thundering, I saw Isabel in the front row, beaming. Claire and Mark were there, giving me a thumbs up, and in a shadowed corner, I saw Arthur Sterling. "Good morning," I began. "I'm Eleanor Bishop, and today I want to talk about what happens when invisible work becomes visible." During the QA, a young woman asked what advice I had for women whose contributions were being overlooked. "Document everything," I said. "Trust your own worth, and never, ever, let anyone tell you to wait outside a room that you helped build." 2 weeks later, Sophie won first place at her school's STEM fair for a storytelling app she had designed. "Who inspired you?" one of the judges asked. "My mom, Eleanor Bishop," she said into the microphone. "She's the smartest programmer in the world." When she ran to me, holding her trophy, she said, "I did it, Mommy, and no one can take the credit but me." I knew then that I had broken the cycle. Exactly 1 year after the gala, an email arrived from an address I vaguely recognized. The subject line was just, "I'm sorry." It was from Julian. He was working in the service department at his brother's car dealership in Ohio. He saw what he lost. He said he was a fool. He said Chloe got 18 months in a minimum security prison. He said he wasn't asking for forgiveness, just for me to know that he finally understood. I read it twice, feeling only a distant, hollow pity. Then I deleted it, without a reply. My office at Momentum is on the 42nd floor, a corner suite with a panoramic view of the city. Every morning, I look out at the Pinnacle Tower, the place where I once stood on the outside looking in. It feels like a lifetime ago. A knock on my door. Priya came in, her eyes shining. "Ellie, the Pentagon just approved the contract. They're implementing your algorithm across their entire supply chain." I smiled. "Set up the team meeting." As she left, I looked at the Pinnacle Tower again. Next month, Momentum is holding our own gala there. I'm on the planning committee. My first rule, every single employee can bring whomever they want. No one waits outside. My phone buzzed. A text from Sophie. "Mom, can we work on my new app idea tonight? It's about women in science who changed the world." "Of course, baby," I typed back. "We'll start with Marie Curie and work our way forward." "And we'll end with you," she replied. With a heart emoji, I smiled. A year ago, I was a woman standing defeated in a hallway. I had no idea I was actually standing at the beginning of everything. The woman who was told to wait outside had become the one everyone was waiting to see. And this time, I was the one holding the guest list. This story of sweet revenge had you cheering for Ellie. Hit that like button right now. My favorite part was when she stood outside that ballroom in her sapphire dress, sending the email that changed everything. What was your favorite moment of justice? Drop it in the comments below. Don't miss more thrilling stories like this. Subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss an upload. End of story.